Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You're just going about your day. Maybe you're working, maybe you're home with your family, and there's a sudden, unexpected knock on the door.
Mm-hmm.
It's the police. And they're telling you you're under arrest. No warning, no explanation right then. Just like that.
Yeah.
It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it?
It really does. But you're right, for far too many people across India, this isn't fiction. It's a sharp, confusing, and, deeply unsettling reality.
It's a jarring moment, that abrupt intrusion.
Exactly. Often without any clear, immediate justification being offered right there and then. It really highlights a critical kind of vulnerability in the system.
It feels arbitrary.
Completely arbitrary. And it leaves people totally blindsided.
Absolutely. And it points directly to what we're trying to unpack today.
Mm-hmm.
This significant issue of illegal arrests and the really challenging, often frustrating problem of police accountability in India.
Right.
We spent some time digging into a whole stack of information, exploring notes, analysis, research, all shedding light on this vital subject.
And our goal with this deep dive, really, is to understand the roots. Why does this happen?
Yeah.
To see the tangible, real-world impact it has on individuals, on communities, people just like you listening.
Mm-hmm.
And crucially, to look at what practical steps could genuinely make a difference. How do we actually, raise the bar for justice? How do we ensure fairness in policing for everyone?
Raising the bar.
Mm-hmm.
That feels absolutely key here. Because the current reality for many suggests the bar is, well, sometimes distressingly low.
It certainly seems that way sometimes.
So where do we even begin? I guess we have to start with the problem itself. These instances where law enforcement kind of goes off script.
Right.
I mean, fundamentally, an arrest is the state, through
Yeah.
the police,
Yeah.
taking someone into custody because there's a suspicion they've committed a crime. That's like the basic principle, right, for maintaining law and order.
It is. The system needs that power, the power to arrest,
Yeah.
no question. But the core issue, the thing that causes so much concern and really erodes trust, is when police detain individuals without meeting the necessary legal criteria.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly, without the criteria?
It means detention without enough evidence to back up the suspicion,
Right.
or without the proper legal grounds defined by law, or, and this is often key, without the actual necessity the situation demands. It becomes an exercise of power that just lacks a legitimate basis.
And this isn't just a few isolated incidents, is it? The scale seems quite significant.
Oh, it's huge. We looked at the data from the National Crime Records Bureau, the NCRB, their 2022 figures. Over 1.1 crore arrests nationwide.
1.1 crore, that's what, over 11 million people?
11 million people taken into custody in just 1 year. It's a massive number.
Wow.
And look, while obviously the vast majority of those might have been perfectly legitimate, followed procedure.
Sure.
Reports from human rights groups like Amnesty India, Human Rights Watch, they consistently flag that a significant chunk seem to bypass or just ignore proper legal procedures.
So the sheer volume creates opportunities for things to go wrong.
It certainly seems to, and you see patterns in how this plays out on the ground.
Like what?
Well, a common tactic appears to be making arrests under real...
The disruption to your job, missing important family things, the stress, the uncertainty. It's huge.
And beyond that immediate chaos, the fallout lingers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's the social stigma, just being arrested even if you're cleared later.
Right, the neighbors talk.
Exactly. Then there are often hefty legal costs involved, trying to sort it all out, get released, challenge the arrest. And sadly, far too many documented cases involve reports of physical or psychological abuse during detention after an improper arrest. The damage is deep and lasts a long time.
Okay, so that paints a pretty bleak picture of the reality. But here's the thing. There is a rule book, right? There are laws designed specifically to govern this, to limit the power of arrest.
There absolutely is. The main legal framework in India is the Code of Criminal Procedure, 1973, usually just called the CRPC.
The CRPC, got it.
Yeah, that's the backbone. And a really key section when we're talking about arrests is Section 41. This part details exactly when a police officer can make an arrest without needing a warrant from a magistrate.
Okay, so they can arrest without a warrant sometimes. When's that allowed?
Yes, for what are considered the more serious crimes, generally those punishable with 7 years or more in prison.
7 years or more, okay.
But importantly, even then, the law doesn't just give them a free pass. Section 41 specifically says the officer must have reasonable suspicion that the person committed such an offense.
Reasonable suspicion. That sounds like a key phrase.
It is. There has to be a concrete, rational basis for that suspicion. It can't just be a hunch.
And that reasonable suspicion part is what often gets fudged.
It seems that way sometimes, yes. And for less serious offenses, anything under that 7-year mark, they absolutely do need a magistrate's warrant. That formal permission from the judiciary is required.
No exceptions for minor stuff.
No. They have to go to a judicial magistrate, present their case, get that warrant before taking someone into custody. Now, the problem of police bypassing even the reasonable suspicion bit for serious crimes, or just making arrests unnecessarily even when technically allowed, it got so bad that the Supreme Court had to step in pretty forcefully.
And that's where that big case comes in. Arnesh Kumar.
Exactly. Arnesh Kumar versus State of Bihar, 2014, a landmark judgment. It really highlighted how problematic things had become. The court basically said, look, the power to arrest is not the duty to arrest.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should automatically.
Precisely. The judgment stressed that arrests, especially in those cases punishable up to 7 years, must be necessary. And that necessity has to be properly justified. It shouldn't be routine.
And did they give specific instructions, like actual steps police have to take?
They did. Very specific mandatory guidelines. The police officer must record in writing the specific reasons and justification for making the arrest.
Okay, put it on paper.
Yes. The person being arrested must be clearly informed of the grounds for their arrest, right then and there.
Know why you're being arrested. Makes sense.
And crucially, they must be helped to get access to legal aid promptly after detention.
Access to a lawyer. Okay.
These were clear, concrete steps meant to stop arbitrary arrests.
Which honestly sounds like a pretty solid set of safeguards on paper.
It does.
You'd think if these rules and the court's guidelines were actually followed, this whole problem of illegal arrests would be much smaller.
You would hope so. But the disconnect, the frustrating reality, is that despite the CRPC, despite the Supreme Court's clear directions, these procedures are still, well, very often disregarded.
The rulebook's there, but it's gathering dust on the shelf sometimes.
That's a fair way to put it. Adherence is inconsistent at best.
Which leads us straight to the big, complex question. Why? Why does this keep happening? It can't just be individual bad apples, right? There must be something deeper, more systemic going on.
Absolutely. It's not just about individual officers. There are systemic pressures within the policing structure itself that contribute significantly.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain a bit. What kind of systemic pressures are we talking about?
Well, one major factor that gets discussed a lot is something called target-driven policing.
Targets, like arrest quotas.
Essentially, yeah. In some areas, there's a perception, maybe even a formal evaluation system, based on metrics like the number of arrests made. Officers can feel pressure to hit these targets.
So it becomes about quantity over quality.
It can incentivize an arrest first, figure it out later, or arrest first, justify later mentality. The focus shifts away from the legality and necessity towards just getting the numbers up.
Right. It's like judging a hospital only by how many patients they admit, not how many get better. It completely misses the point.
It can create perverse incentives, absolutely. Another big issue is the legislation itself. We touched on this, those overly broad or vague laws.
Yeah.
They're just ripe for misuse. If a law lacks clear, specific definitions, it gives too much discretion to the police, opening the door to arbitrary application. We saw that clearly with the old Section 66A of the IT Act.
Right, the one used for arresting people over online comments before it was struck down.
Exactly. So vague it could mean anything.
And this could be an issue with other laws, too, like the UAPA or even parts of the new criminal codes, the BNS, that replaced the CRPC.
Potentially, yes. If sections are open to wide interpretation, police can apply them in ways maybe not intended, making it easier to justify arrests on shaky grounds. It turns the rulebook from a guide into, well, a flexible tool.
And maybe the biggest issue underpinning all this, accountability, or the lack of it.
That's arguably the most fundamental problem. When misconduct happens, what's the usual process? Internal police inquiries.
The police investigating the police.
Right, which inherently lacks independence and often public trust.
So who is holding them accountable when they step out of line?
That's the critical question. Independent oversight bodies like police complaints authorities, they either don't exist in many places, or where they do, they often lack the real power, the resources, or the independence to investigate effectively and enforce consequences.
So it creates a situation where misconduct can happen without much fear of repercussions.
It can certainly feel that way, an environment where arbitrary actions might occur without meaningful consequences.
Which unfortunately leads to another uncomfortable point.
Mm.
Sometimes it's not just systemic pressure or vague laws. Sometimes it's about abuse of power, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Personal issues, extortion attempts, just asserting authority. The lack of checks allows for that too.
When power isn't effectively checked, the potential for misuse for whatever motive goes way up. The system needs strong, functioning checks and balances built right in.
Okay, it's easy to talk stats and systems, but these issues hit real people hard. Let's make this more concrete with some examples, drawing from the information we looked at.
Definitely. Bringing it down to individual stories is crucial. Think about Mohammed Zubair, the co-founder of Alt News, arrested in 2022.
Right, that was a huge story. Over a tweet from years before, wasn't it? Yeah. And multiple cases filed.
Exactly. Multiple FIRs in different states. He spent weeks being moved around in judicial custody.
And the Supreme Court eventually stepped in.
Yes, granted him bail, clubbed the FIRs, and made some strong remarks questioning the necessity of the arrest itself. It highlighted how the process felt punitive and the arrest potentially unnecessary for the alleged offense.
So a high-profile example of questioning the justification.
Then there's the case of S.R. Darapuri, an elderly Dalit activist in UP, arrested in 2023.
What happened there?
During protests related to the CAA, he was charged with rioting. But reports suggested he was quite far from the actual disturbance, partly due to his age and health. The evidence directly linking him to violence seemed, well, pretty thin.
Another case raising questions about the grounds for arrest.
And it's vital we remember this isn't just happening to journalists or activists in the news. It affects ordinary citizens, too. There was that really stark case in Kolkata in 2024 involving a vegetable vendor.
A vegetable vendor? What happened?
He was detained, apparently, for just obstructing traffic.
Yeah.
His cart was reportedly slightly misplaced.
And for that?
He spent 2 nights in lockup. His perishable goods, his entire stock, spoiled. He lost his livelihood for that time. No formal charges stuck, no compensation, just detention and significant personal loss over something minor.
Wow. That's incredibly disproportionate.
It is. And these stories, Zubair, Darapuri, the vendor, they aren't just isolated incidents. They're snapshots illustrating the systemic issues. Vague charges, questionable necessity, and the very real human cost when procedures are ignored. It cuts across all walks of life.
And the impact doesn't stop with the person arrested, does it? There's a wider ripple effect.
Absolutely. It extends far beyond the individual. It affects society and the justice system as a whole.
How so? How does one illegal arrest damage the bigger picture?
Fundamentally, it just shreds public trust.
Yeah.
Trust in the police, trust in the whole justice system.
Right.
When people see police acting arbitrarily or maybe more focused on control than on due process and protection, they lose faith. They become hesitant to approach the police for help.
Less likely to report crimes.
Less likely to report crimes, less likely to cooperate with investigations, which, ironically, undermines public safety for everyone. It's like losing faith in a service you absolutely rely on.
That makes total sense. If you don't trust the system to be fair, why engage with it?
Exactly. And on top of that, every improperly grounded or unnecessary arrest adds burden to an already overloaded court system.
Clogging the courts.
Yeah. Judges, court staff, their time is taken up processing these cases. Time and resources that could be spent on tackling genuine criminal matters get diverted.
And we see evidence of this clog in those NCRB numbers on under trials, right? That figure you mentioned, nearly 30% acquitted eventually.
Yes, that 2022 data point. Nearly 30% of under-trial prisoners eventually acquitted. That's incredibly telling.
Think about that. Roughly 1 in 3 people sitting in jail waiting for trial, sometimes for months, even years.
Is eventually found not guilty.
It's a massive waste of resources, locking people up unnecessarily.
Huge waste of state resources. But more tragically, think of the human cost. Thousands upon thousands of people suffering lost liberty, lost income, immense stress, only to be told later it shouldn't have happened that way.
That's a profound loss of faith in justice on a very personal level.
For them, for their families, absolutely.
Okay, so the problem is clear. The law exists, but isn't always followed. The reasons are systemic. The impact is devastating. It feels heavy. But let's pivot. Let's talk solutions. How do we actually raise the bar? What are the practical steps?
Right, moving from diagnosis to treatment, so to speak. There are several interconnected areas where real effort could make a difference. A fundamental starting point has to be police training.
Training. But they get trained, don't they?
They do, but it's about the emphasis and the content. Often, training heavily prioritizes physical skills, weapons handling, crowd control.
Which are necessary, of course.
Necessary, yes, but there needs to be a much stronger, more consistent mandatory focus on legal procedures. Understanding the CRPC or the new BNS, especially regarding arrests, human rights principles, the specific Supreme Court guidelines like Arnesh Kumar.
So making legal understanding as core as physical training.
Exactly. Legal nuance and procedural fairness need to be absolutely fundamental, not an afterthought.
It's like knowing how to use a powerful tool, but not knowing the safety rules or the manual. You might be skilled, but you could cause serious harm.
That's a great analogy. Second, we need to look hard at the laws themselves. As we said, vague laws are a problem.
Tighten them up.
Yes. Review and refine laws, like parts of the UAPA, maybe relevant sections of the BNS, make them less open to broad interpretation and misuse. And alongside that, the judiciary has a role. Magistrates need to really scrutinize police requests for arrest and custody.
Be a stronger filter.
A much stronger filter. Ensure the necessity criteria are genuinely met before authorizing detention. Don't just rubber stamp it.
Okay, so clearer laws, stronger judicial check.
What else? Third, and this is critical, genuinely independent oversight. Relying just on internal police inquiries for complaints, it's just not credible enough.
Right.
We need independent bodies, call them civilian oversight boards, strengthened police complaints authorities, whatever the structure, but they need real legal mandate, proper resources, and genuine independence to conduct impartial investigations.
And the power to act, not just investigate.
Absolutely. The power to recommend and ensure disciplinary action is taken against officers found to have acted improperly. Real teeth.
We know some states, like Maharashtra, Kerala, have tried things here, but it sounds like this needs to be nationwide and robust.
Widespread implementation with real authority, yes. Fourth, technology. It offers some interesting possibilities for transparency.
Like body cameras.
Body cams are part of it, yeah. They create an objective record. Another idea floating around is a public, searchable database for arrests.
A database, how would that work?
It could record key details, reason for arrest, evidence cited, arresting officer's name, obviously protecting sensitive personal info, but making the fact of the arrest and its justification public.
Interesting. That creates transparency.
Yeah.
Harder to make arbitrary arrests if there's a public record you have to justify.
Transparency is a powerful deterrent, exactly. Fifth, we should make compensation for victims of illegal arrest mandatory and consistently enforced.
Paying people who were wrongly detained.
Yes. Covering lost income, legal fees, the emotional distress. The Supreme Court has nudged towards this, but it's rarely systematic.
Right.
Making it a standard enforced consequence puts a real cost on the system for getting it wrong. It adds a significant incentive for police to be damn sure their actions are justified and necessary.
It shifts the burden back to the system instead of leaving the victim to bear all the costs.
Precisely. And finally, a huge piece is public awareness. People need to know their rights.
What rights specifically?
Basic rights during an encounter or arrest. The right to be told why you're being arrested, the right to remain silent, the right to contact a lawyer quickly. Many people just don't know these things.
And knowing your rights empowers you to push back a bit, or at least demand correct procedure.
Exactly. Knowledge is power here. This awareness can be spread through public campaigns, schools, NGOs, using media, social media. Get the information out there.
Okay, so looking at all these pieces, better training, clearer laws, independent oversight, tech, compensation, public awareness. The big picture goal isn't just fixing a legal process, is it?
No, not at all. The ultimate aim is fundamentally about rebuilding trust, healing the relationship between the police and the communities they're meant to serve.
Because when the system actually works fairly, when arrests follow the law based on real evidence and necessity,
everyone benefits. Public safety improves because police focus on real crime. There's more respect for law enforcement. The courts aren't clogged with unnecessary cases. The whole system works better.
And this isn't just wishful thinking. Other places have made progress.
It's not impossible. Look at systems elsewhere. The UK has stronger independent complaints bodies. Canada has pretty strict protocols. It shows progress is possible. India definitely has the legal minds and the framework capacity to implement similar reforms. It just takes sustained effort and, frankly, political will.
Feels like it's less about what to do and more about the challenge of actually doing it.
That often seems to be the case, doesn't it?
So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway from this deep dive, and what final thoughts should we leave our listener mulling over?
I think the central takeaway is that illegal arrests aren't just abstract legal issues or statistics. They are deeply personal injustices. They chip away at the foundation of a just society for everyone. When someone's liberty can be improperly taken, it makes everyone feel less secure, less fair.
Right.
Pushing for a system where this doesn't happen isn't just about technicalities, it's about upholding fundamental rights.
And achieving that better system, it's not impossible. It's complex, sure, but it needs understanding, effort, and a collective demand for change,
Yeah.
just like any big societal issue.
Exactly. So the provocative thought I'd leave you with, listening right now, is this. The persistence of illegal arrests clearly shows we need to seriously raise the bar for both fairness and accountability in our justice system.
Mm-hmm.
Given everything we've talked about today, the scale of the problem, its human cost, the potential solutions, what role can you see for yourself in demanding a system that truly works fairly, transparently, and ensures liberty isn't just taken arbitrarily for everyone?
A powerful question indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into such a critical issue.
It's a vital conversation, and hopefully one that leads to action.
Indeed. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll be back with another deep dive soon.